Welcome back, everybody, to the Green Socks Podcast, the podcast where we dip our socks in the green of. Okay, well, I didn't think that one through. But either way, tonight I am drinking Southern Tier Pumpkin Seasonal. It is a pumpkin imperial, so if my jokes get even worse over the course of the next hour, you'll know why. So, in either case, I've got with me today Kevin of the Red Caps fame. Kevin, say hello to the good three people that watch this stream.
Hello to your mom and to your wife and whoever the third person is. It is great to be here. Thanks very much for inviting me on.
No, yeah, thank you for coming. And that third person is usually me on recap, so I will appreciate the heads up when we get there. So, all right. So I'd like to start off tonight. A quick thank you. I've got a handful of call-ins that are in waiting. Uh, I got a handful of call-ins that are in waiting, but we're going to chat a little bit about something different tonight. So I'm going to jump into the call-ins next episode. So I do thank you very much, folks, for your engagement. Um, in the meantime, Kevin, I'd like to take a little bit of time. Most folks who are listening to this podcast are related to. I mean, know me. So take a second there. Tell us about you.
Um, I have a little podcast that I have been sadly neglecting for probably close to a month now, called the Red Caps Podcast. OSR based podcast. Usually keep my episodes fairly short, although some of them will run long. But you're looking at generally about 10 minutes of me picking some sort of a subject and pretending like I have some sort of knowledge on it as I ramble on a little bit about it. It's been a lot of fun. I kind of started it about a year ago, and it was just a way for me to kind of stay engaged when I wasn't really playing too much. It was a way for me to kind of keep going with the hobby in general while I wasn't actually getting too many games in. And through it, I have every time I've done something and gotten a feedback, the collection of people I now have to listen to, and I say have to as if it's a chore, but the amount of people I listen to now on podcasts has been explosive growth compared to what it was a
Yeah.
year ago, and my bank account has also taken an explosive hit from the amount of Kickstarters that everybody has now directed me to. So it's been fun. I've really enjoyed it thus far.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, the key to saving money on those Kickstarters is to uh, appear on competitions and win stuff like Mitterzines or so.
I have zero luck. You could have a drawing where there's only me, and you will somehow still reach in and draw out a blank piece of paper or
Draw Crow
something.
T Robot. So all right.
Exactly.
So you mentioned you had dropped out. You weren't able to get games in. That was work, family.
It was a little bit of COVID stuff. I was playing some stuff online, but
Mm,
a lot of the people that I've played with online, with a few exceptions, are more of a 5e group.
mm,
And I don't mind playing 5e, but I'm not a big fan of running it as a DM.
mm,
And I prefer to DM than play a lot of the time.
mm.
I have been able to get in a few basic games or white box games, that sort of stuff here and there, but haven't had anything super steady for long as well.
Okay. So you're getting. Are you able to get back into any of the in-person stuff these days, or exclusively online?
It's been pretty exclusively online. Here, where I'm at in Canada, it's a little bit more strict in terms of the gathering. Still, people are still pretty hesitant to do a lot of in-person stuff. It
Mm,
is getting better. Things are starting to open up, but it's still got that weird kind of the new world that we're living in, where everybody's staying so far apart. It's hard to get stuff gathered. But
yeah.
um,
Yep. Make sure you have a mask on that subnet. I hear Trudeau. If he found out you were talking to a states guy, he's going to make you quarantine on the computer.
yeah, we'll hold this one up. I know this is an audio podcast, but here's my D&D face mask.
That's
Um,
nice. I like that. That's pretty. I like that.
but yeah, no, the online stuff. I actually don't mind online gaming. I know it gets a big hit in certain circles of the OSR side of things, where a lot of people are very against it. But I find it to be fine. I don't have a huge disagreement with it. I'm doing what we're doing here, where we can kind of see each other and we're chatting. I don't need to have all the tools, but I do like some of the tools too. So
Yep.
it'll work there.
Yep, I love me the VTT tools. So, yeah, my
Yeah.
introduction to VTTs was D20 Pro back in the day when it was brand new. A buddy of mine had picked up a copy and flung it up on a projector. So we went, hung out at his house, and he dimmed the lights and put the VTT on the wall, which was pretty cool. So I had a lot of fun playing with him until his wife decided I was not a good person, and we weren't allowed to hang out anymore. So, but they're divorced now, so if I'm ever in Georgia, aha, Daniel coming to play.
Nice. Yeah, I my VTT of choice right now. If I'm going to run something long term, it'll probably be Forge,
Hmm.
Forge VTT. If I'm doing something short, if it's a quick pickup game or something, Owlbear Rodeo would be
Hmm.
just because it's so fast and so easy. Um,
Hmm. Yeah,
but
I hadn't done too much with Owlbear. I tried it out a little bit, but they don't. It didn't have the same. It didn't have dynamic lighting in it, and it had everything I wanted except the dynamic lighting that cast off the pogs, I guess. So I'm
yeah,
showing my age there. There's supposed to be tokens, I think, is what the kids are calling them. But
you cannot possibly be that much older than I am, so I know exactly what you're speaking of.
yeah, no. So yeah, I like to pretend I like to pretend I'm older than I am. So how about that Danny Kaye music? So Canadian actually. He's I think Danny Kaye was a Canadian actor who came down and was became America's sweetheart back in the day. So
Hmm.
not going to look that up. I have internet access. I'm going to let the viewers call in. So
Yeah,
uh,
I'm not actually familiar with the name, so I
yeah.
can't even provide a running commentary on that.
Right. I would recommend. So we are a little early for the holiday season, but I would recommend checking out White Christmas with Bing Crosby. It's a little film that my wife has us watch every year, a musical. So the boys get into it despite being 2 years old. And Danny Kaye is the redheaded fella who sings, dances, and does he never considered himself a comedian, but he sings, dances, and makes you chuckle. So it's a good movie about some army guys trying to bring Christmas back to their old general. So
Nice. My go-to Christmas movies are nowhere near as classic nor classy as yours. I am very much of the Garfield Christmas special
mm,
and and Die Hard,
mm.
and
Die Hard
maybe
is Die Hard is the one we do on Christmas Eve. It's important. To, so
yeah, everybody says that's an action movie. It's a
mm,
Christmas movie.
yeah, it is. So that no question. This is our season opener every year. Tim
Oh
Burton's
yes,
Nightmare Before Christmas.
yes, very nice.
Great little crossover movie, and that, like I said, that's our opener every year. So we're set to watch that one in about a month, I'd say. So, and that is why it's on my desk. It's hidden from my wife because she's already playing Christmas music to the boys, and so.
Uh, yeah, I don't want to come off as a Grinch, but that's just so no for me. I love it,
Mhm.
but I gotta wait till December.
Oh yeah,
It's
I will admit,
we haven't even gotten past Canadian Thanksgiving
and that's in like February or something. So,
yet. Our Thanksgiving's in October, your guys' is in November, and then yeah.
mhm. Yeah,
So
yeah, we have. I will admit, I'm an early Christmas and late Christmas. Chris at our house, it runs from November 1. So as soon as the trick or treat light goes off, the Christmas lights turn on, and then it runs until Epiphany, or until the association threatens to fine me, whichever one comes first. So, but
oh, you live under the thumb of one of those things, do
yeah,
you?
we can't. You can't avoid it where we are. It's we did avoid. They call them CDDs. I forget what it stands for, but when developers don't actually pay for the infrastructure and they take out like a loan, and so you're stuck paying like $1,000 a year for 30 years, the entire neighborhood to pay for waterworks. So as opposed to
Really?
traditional, yeah, it's a new thing they were doing. Well, new to me, but they were doing down our neck of the woods. But we dodged those, which is key. So, but. Anyway, yep, I do appreciate you dialing in. So, Steve, how long have you been gaming?
Oh, um, probably since high school for me. So
Hmm.
um, not to show my age too much, but some like the mid to late '90s
Hmm.
forward, but with a bunch of big gaps in there though.
Hmm.
Like there was a long period of time where I had nothing to do with. I fell hard into the PC gaming side
Hmm.
and left tabletop
Hmm.
and board gaming altogether. So there was like a period of time in high school and then a large drought up
Hmm.
until probably about
But
I
you were
don't
like
know, probably.
meeting girls and going to parties and dumb stuff like that.
I'd love to say that was what was happening. But this is the cleric wear ringmail, not the monkey and monkey lies and dances and pretends he was something he wasn't podcast. But no, it was yeah, just other things came in and it fell out of favor
Hmm.
with my group of friends at the time, so it wasn't something that came back up.
Hmm.
And then probably around, I mean, as much as I dislike running the game, probably around the time the 5e was coming back, um, and I had looked at a little bit of Pathfinder before then, and kind of bounced off of that. Didn't really care for it, and then 5e was coming back, and there was a lot more interest coming in, and I played a little bit of 5e, and then had my issues where I just there was parts of that game I just didn't care for, and then
Hmm.
went back and looked at some other stuff and found the whole world of OSR that I had not really seen or known anything about, and
Hmm.
dived in 2 feet first and
Yep, and
haven't
here,
come back
yep,
up for air.
and yeah, absolutely, and here we are. So drowning in the OSR. So cool. So yeah, cool. So that's how we got into here. And you mentioned you got into podcasting as a sort of a creative outlet. So that's fun. What are your what were your goals for the podcast? Did you just pop in, want to talk about stuff that you were doing, stuff that you were interested in? So
Yeah, it
and
was. I didn't really have a goal per se. I had been listening to a few different podcasts. I went out on my wife and I do a long road trip at least once or twice a year from where I live here in Canada to the far east coast of it, where our folks are from, and it's usually about 18 hours in a vehicle going.
mm,
And so I would be constantly listening to various things. And on one of the trips ages ago, I did a huge binge of Save or Die, and just kind of got enthralled with the idea that there was this podcast of people talking about the stuff that I was really into. Meanwhile, my wife was beside me, rolling her eyes the entire time, and I was like, I might be able to do something like that. And then I started listening to Glenn and his podcast, and which for whatever reason my brain is blanking right now, but you will fill
yep,
me in, I'm sure, in a second.
that's the
And
Old Man
Grognard,
Grognard. Yep,
Grognard, thank
Glenn
you.
Hallstrom.
So I started listening to his, and I was like, well, he's doing it every day, and he's got a nice little short, to the point thing that he wants to get across, and he's getting it done every day.
Mm,
I knew I couldn't do it every day thing, but I was like, oh, I can do a short one
mm,
like that. And he was doing it as a one person short podcast. I was like, surely I could do that. I can't maybe meet what Save or Die is doing with their nice big cast and long, meaningful episodes, but I can do something short and pretend like I know what I'm talking about. So I just
mm,
decided to give it a shot.
absolutely.
And
Though admittedly, I think Glenn's kids are a little older than yours are. So
definitely,
yeah.
definitely.
I remember we were chatting a little bit before the call, where we were both hanging out trying to get our respective youngins to sleep. Do you have just one, or you have a couple that you're dealing with?
No, I just got the one.
Mm,
So I have not strayed into the realm where they can tag team up on me yet.
mm.
It's just the one, and that's enough to manage.
Yeah, absolutely. How old is boy, girl?
Boy, he's going into grade one here. He
Going
just
to
started
grade
grade one,
one.
so
All right. So
yeah,
that's 5 or 6 ish. So,
yeah,
all
six
right,
is
fun.
here.
Yep. So technically, my boys are turning 3 on their birthday this December.
That's generally how that works, right?
Yeah,
You,
it
you,
is.
you level up
You level
on
up.
that
Yep,
day.
you do. And but because I have twins, that means as of December, I will have been a parent for 6 years. So you have more experience than I do until Pearl Harbor Day. So
That's how that works, is it?
yep, pretty sure. Pretty sure. That's why it took my wife 18 months to give birth. So
Poor
but
lady.
no, I kid. It was way worse than that. But anyway, well, I think we can we've been goofing off a little bit, but more importantly, I think this collaboration again, we wanted to come together because of a Twitter thread we had a while back where we were talking about a moderately controversial subject in the OSR and RPG sphere: character building. So, the topic for tonight's conversation: character building. So, uh, well, go ahead and I'll let you take it away. Tell me about what is a character build for you, and how does it impact your game or a gaming experience?
So for me, a character build, the way I view it, it's part of the reason that I'm not as big of a fan of 5e. Um, Character builds I find come in more complex or more option rich games, and it can stray from something like 5e, which isn't necessarily that complex. It just has a lot of options, to being something like some of the cyberpunk games that are just incredibly in depth, and you almost
Shadowrun.
need some.
Shadowrun.
Thank you. I wasn't going to say it, but you did. Where you literally need software to create a character. Like you need to download an app and run through it to create a character.
Mm,
Um, so for me, the idea of a build is that you've decided that you are going to pre-plan out your entire character through this massive list of options, either because you feel you need to or because you want to optimize yourself to be the very best that you could be,
mm,
rather than just discovering the characters you go through. Whereas my flip side argument of what isn't a build is typically how I would
mm,
play or how I prefer to see played older OSR games, where
mm,
you roll up the stats, you have no pre, you may not even name the fighter. It's fighter B,
mm.
and if he lives to be 2 or 3 levels, and you give him a name and you continue on, and as he does actions, he builds a backstory
Yep.
and has things going on.
Yep. You live your backstory rather than write it.
Yeah, it's the difference of experiencing and discovering who the character is versus bringing somebody and saying, this is the person I'm sticking into your world, whether or
Mm,
not it fits or not.
yeah.
And
Yep, absolutely. So I will admit I've written backstories before. A story comes to mind. I had a buddy who, because I usually let in a traditional campaign, I encourage my players to give me like 3 or 4 bullet points, because it's enough to ingrain them in the world. It's enough to have them as part of the party, and it gives me something to play with, or relatives to kill off as the DM. But it more importantly, we have a it's a short thing that ingrains them into the world and ties the party together. And so I'll admit I encourage those kind of backstories in a traditional campaign. Um, I've
there is a
also,
difference. There's a difference though between backstory and build. So
oh
right,
yes, very much, yeah,
backstory is one thing, whereas a build is more like you're planning out on this level I'm going to do this, and on
right.
this level I'm going to do this,
I'm gonna
where you
grab
don't
this
know what the
feat. I'm gonna move this stat here. Yeah.
yeah, you don't know what the story is going to be at that point of whether that is any use,
Hmm.
right? Like
Absolutely, and I ran into that for the first time, that pre-planning of a character for the first time in college. So when I was a kid, my I played a 2e game. I just assumed it was 2e. I didn't actually get to touch the books, but uh, with some neighborhood kids, and then they moved on to EverQuest. And they're like, this is way cool. I'm like, yeah, I don't have internet, so but then we bought the when uh, arch foe incoming, when the third edition box set came out, the third edition basic box. My mom picked that up for us, and my little brother and I played the dickens out of it. So you have Oliver Twist, you have Tale of Two Cities and Christmas Carol all in the same pile, because we played the dickens out of that board and that map, every scenario in it. Um, but we played it the way that I had experienced it. We had the core classes. You went and did your thing, and then you didn't think about the character. You thought about what you were doing. And then in college, we came across, that was when I realized that other people who had this magical substance called discretionary income, were able to pick up other resources, and then you suddenly have a library of resources that you can do to build or change your character. And so arguably, while you had proficiencies and you had dual classing in the past, the real character building from a perspective of D&D didn't show up until TSR went under, and Wizards had kind of took over. And though games like Shadowrun and RuneQuest predate Wizards of the Coast. Literally, I think RuneQuest came out in the 80s or no 70s, and it was skill based, and you built your character. Uh, the big push in D&D, that changeover was when third edition hit, and
So another game I'm a big fan of, which I will hold up here, the Fantasy Trip. Um, Precursor to GURPS, if you're not familiar with Fantasy Trip,
that
is
is a
it's a
big
Steve
box
Jackson.
set, or you are much smaller than I imagine you.
I will let you decide which way that is. But the the
Yeah,
Fantasy Trip
this
is a precursor to
DVD is
GURPS.
4 feet across.
The scale that we could use for things. The, but it is a game where, much like GURPS, your choices are endless of how you could distribute various feats or abilities that you give to your characters. And it was also, from that era of late
Hmm.
'70s or '80s, and so it's not. 3E definitely, with the splat books and everything else, definitely brought
Hmm.
that era, but they didn't invent it. Like pre-planning out how you're going to do the entire thing has been around for a very, very, very long time.
Hmm.
Um, and it's like I said, I don't see anything so much that there's wrong with it. It's just not how I prefer to play, because I feel like it takes away mystery. It removes the discoverability of what could be.
Hmm.
Like, in a way, you almost would, in a perfect world, everyone would know the rules, but you wouldn't know what might be possible for your
Hmm.
character later on, right? So that whenever
Hmm.
you level up, you get that shock of, oh, I could do this or that. That's amazing,
Hmm.
and
Yeah,
really be into it that way.
builds give the appearance of agency because you have a lot of options you can take. However, you're limited to the options you've picked. So the freedom exists only outside the game, and as soon as the dice hit the table, it's rote. So.
Yeah, and and it can limit people too, right? Like, if you've pre-planned out everything, you
Hmm.
can be at a point where I can't go this way because I want to do this later on, and so
Hmm.
you stunt what you're doing now for what might be the potential in the future that you may never get to. Your character could die in the next session, rather than just doing what is even not necessarily optimal, but what is
Hmm.
fun now, versus what
Hmm.
could be the best for you later or something. I don't know. I
Hmm.
don't know if I'm explaining that well,
Yeah,
but
it's turning it into it's taking it from an organic experience into a math problem, and
yeah,
so and uh, I've optimized my character to use a chain weapon and trip attacks, so I cannot then expand into, because if we want to take the campaign into a pirate zone where we're taking ships onto the high seas, I can't. I have to roll up a new character. I have to make a new plan because my previous choices don't mesh with where we're going. So.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And so yeah, for me, it's it's maintaining that fun, as well as if you're the DM and you're running the world and somebody comes in with a massive pre-assumption of how everything's going to go, it almost feels like they're not interested in the world the way that you're going to present it to them. Like, they've already
Mm,
decided what the fantasy world is in their head of how things are
mm,
going to go, and it's just going to be, I'm going to drop this player in and play in that world regardless of
right.
how the world actually reacts to it or anything else.
Yep. I think
Um,
I actually had that. I had that exact same argument with someone on the internet the other day, forgetting which platform, but the principle of it was where you have an organic character development, which is to say your class and stats and level, they define sort of what you do, but they don't define who you are, and you grow as the campaign progresses, as opposed to the build where you've planned it out in advance. There's a shift of focus. In the previous example, you have the game, you have your character, you have the adventure. And then in the latter example, you have the character, you have the adventure, but also you have an external meta game where you're crunching numbers, where you're figuring out how to put pieces together and you're identifying which pieces work. And while that can be fun, I had a lot of fun with it when I had more spare time than when I had a young family and a full-time job. But the key there is it's now two games. You have the actual adventure and you have the character and collaborative mechanical aspect. And so that's one of the big reasons that I've been playing BX almost exclusively lately, is because when you don't have that extra layer, then you're focused on the game. The players in their off time will talk about, and I'm thinking about the people I play with, is we'll have conversations outside of the game about what are we going to do. So how are we going to take on this lich that we just found out? What are we going to do with this item that we just found? How are we going to figure out safely what it does? And so you have conversations outside of game about what happens inside of game, and the focus is on the adventure.
Yeah,
In
I agree with that so much to the point where with Old School Essentials, the new zine that they put out, Carcass Crawler. I'm a huge fan of it. They put out one with their last Kickstarter, the inaugural one, and then the first edition of it just came out. And there was a mage class in there that I raved about probably several times and to different people and on my podcast as well of how much I like that mage class. And then in the first edition, like the first one that the public could get to, they put in, I believe it's called the Acolyte. It's a cleric replacement class, and both of these classes are everything that you are ever going to have as a class feature is up front. So there's no more spell books or prayers that you will get later on. So there's no more choice in terms of your character. You will get a bit better at the stuff that you have, but you're not going to get any more character abilities. Everything else you will get will be stuff that you find in the world. And I was like, something about that was just so appealing to me. Of the idea that you know it's not somebody doesn't have to go and pre-plan anything. They don't have to go. They level up, and it's not like, oh, I need to go look at see what new spells are. There's no slowing of that down. Everything is just continues, and there's less looking at your character sheet because it's more being engaged in the world. Just what does my character do in this moment? But
Yep, absolutely, and so that's one of the key differences. And so is in game and out of game you talk about game versus in game you talk about game, and then out of game you talk about meta. So there's that split, that deviation, that change, and so and again there are people who enjoy the meta game. Now I say metagame. That's not the term I want. But there are people who enjoy the collaborative mechanical comparison. But it's for me it doesn't fit. And so at the end of the day we ask, is or is not building your character OSR? And I submit it really cannot be. So
I will say I will be the differing voice since there's two of us and you've already taken one position. I have to take the other now. I will say because I feel the OSR as a term is incredibly flexible and encompasses so many games that it has to also include the games that I may not personally prefer in that way. I will say it is not the style of OSR that I would probably prefer, but it definitely has a place. Um, if you count the fact that 1E, if you consider first edition and second edition OSR games as well, which is, I guess, debatable whether you do or not, but I do.
I do too.
Um,
So,
then there is a slew of options that somebody can go through on a character build in first edition as well. Not necessarily to the degree that you would on, say, third edition with all the splat books, but there's still some of that there. So yeah, it's there. It's I don't think it's the spirit that the modern OSR typically would go for. If you're going for the, hey, let's have the simple bare bones, be in the moment, I prefer more of like a grim darky game, but whatever it happens to be, if you want to be in that mode, I think the meta experience, like you said, kind of takes out of it a little bit.
so yeah. On an unrelated side, I just noticed I like your little red cap there in the back. I'm not sure what that's sitting on, but
That
that's
is
a rowing machine.
that is a rowing machine.
Beautiful.
It is a little phone holder. So I can just slip the phone on there and try to distract myself with anything other than what I'm doing when I'm sitting on that machine.
Yep, yep. It does give the appearance from this angle of a little red cap sitting on top of your rowing apparatus there. So thank you, Ray Otis, for the rowing machine. And all right.
Yes, yeah. If anybody wishes to sponsor my rowing machine with more red caps, feel free feel free to drop me an email.
So I jumped us off of shark there, but that's okay. Um,
No worries.
so, how we're talking a little bit. I remember you saw you brought out the fantasy trip there.
Hmm.
Classless. I think fantasy trip. Does that have two classes, the magic user or the
Yeah,
warrior type?
it's essentially melee or magic user.
Okay.
Um, and they each have a long laundry list of abilities that you can give to each one based off of their level and their ability scores. Um, but outside of that, there's really no class per se. You can take your warrior and make him completely arranged, like a ranger style fighter, or you could make him the knight in shining armor. So like however you wish. There's a wide berth with both, and same with the magic
Okay.
users.
Yeah. Would you consider so? Would you consider uh, would you consider the classless approach a build experience, or can that be organic?
I think it can be organic. It's for me the whether it becomes organic or not is based off of if you're pre-planning it. Like it's what bothers me, I guess, and I don't know how well will articulate this or how it's going to come off. But for me, it's the if you're spending so much time focusing on what the future of your character is going to be, you're not focusing on the now of your character and the now of the world and experiencing that. It's
Mm,
I'm fine with there being choices, and whenever you go to level up, taking the time to make those choices then,
mm,
and having the classes build and deciding, okay, great, we've all leveled up now, or Bob's leveled up. Bob, where are you going to go? And he can go, well,
mm,
right now we're doing this, and so this would help me the most
mm.
right now. Not not in 5 6 months we might go do this, so I'm going to take this, and then the next time we level up I'll have that, and then we'll be like,
Right. We'll get our
there's
synergies running.
yeah, that sort of thing.
Yep. Yep.
So
Very cool. Yep. Yep. Very cool. So, and that brings us to another subject that's been coming up lately on a handful of podcasts that are talking about min maxing. Have you, in your experience, engaged in or experienced min maxers?
yes, and min maxing, um, again, it comes down to what the motivation is behind min
Mm-hmm.
maxing. There's there's I typically like to, when I'm playing a character, I will just give him a weird flaw that I don't really come up with until it happens. Like I was playing in the Audio Dungeon Discord, I was playing a game in Stonehell Dungeon, um, and we entered an area and there was all kinds. The DM Jose was like, "You hear fluttering wings." And I was like, "Oh no, I hope it's not Sturges." And he goes, "Funny enough, it is Sturges." And then and I just made my
Humorous
I
there.
know.
You.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was like, oh, my character is terrified of insects. Like just that was just how that played out. So that's how I kind of like to bring it. Now I have no problem with somebody saying, "Hey, you know what? I'm rolling up the character, and the DM's giving me the option to switch two stats, and I really want to play a fighter, so it makes more sense that I put my highest stat in the strength one." Is
Mm,
that min maxing, or is that just being smart about how you build your character? I think that's just being smart about how you build your character.
mm,
But if you are like, I must win, so in order to win, I am going like, this
mm,
concept of winning in a role playing game is where I have a problem with min maxing. If you're doing it because your goal is I want to win, or I need to be better than everybody else in my party, or that attitude, the selfishness attitude of it
mm,
is what ruins min maxing. If it's
mm,
just I made a choice, then you made a choice, whatever.
mm.
But it's the attitude that goes with it that
Yeah.
determines whether it's a negative or a bad thing.
Yeah. Yep. I can see that. I think that was at least one opinion that has been expressed to date, and and to as sort of a definition, as sort of a clarity, the min max as a term comes from investment in your character. You minimize investment that's necessary in order to keep the character going, and then you maximize investment in your character's trick, your character's build, your character's thing, and it becomes a show about the character. You dive into your pony, and then you as the min maxing player, uh, you try to focus the game on that particular aspect, and break it. So, like you said, I think a definitive attitude part of that kind of spirit. So, and that's
Yeah,
that.
there's a guy I played 5e with ages ago. I can't remember the exact details of his character, but he was a magic user of some sort, and he had a lot of spells built around manipulating land, like
Mm,
manipulating dirt and water around him. And that turned into everything that he was doing in every situation, no matter how devolve of it being anyway realistic of that situation. There was, oh well, I have this ability. I want to try to do this, to the point where you can see the DM getting frustrated
mm,
and saying like no, that doesn't work here. Do something else, and he couldn't because he had built his whole character towards this idea of doing this. So he had
mm,
minimized everything else that the character could possibly do, which
mm,
there's a ton of options to maximize this one
mm,
cool idea he had, but then refused to bend off of the idea that that maybe not work in all situations.
mm. Yep. When you are a hammer, every problem's a nail. And
Yeah, there you go.
yeah, playing a min maxer, every adversary needs to be tripped with that spike chain. So
Well, yeah, everybody needs to have as many key points on their monk in
mhm.
5e punching with furious whatever it's called every few minutes and continuing on.
Yeah,
So
yep. I've played a little bit of 5e. I will admit that I when it came out because I own exactly one 5e book. I own the Player's Handbook because we picked up Fandelver and the Player's Handbook, and I ran a bit of Fandelver, and that was enough that I said, this probably isn't for me. So I made it. I thought about getting the DMG just to be completionist, but ended up not doing it. So that was when I decided to come home back to where I was. So somewhere between the DMG and 5e PHB. So, and that's not to
right.
hate. That's not to hate on people who enjoy that. There
No,
are,
it's
yeah.
as much as OSR people and myself included. I
Mm,
mean, I've done it several times here. May not personally be into that game, but there's
mm,
no denying the amount of people it's brought into
mm,
the hobby. And the rising tide raises all
mm,
boats. Like, thank goodness that they had the success that they had
mm,
with it. It's brought people from all over back to the hobby. And once they're in, then they are
mm,
able to explore other areas, and whether it's OSR or completely weird, off the wall indie games as well. Whatever, it just brings more people
mm.
into the hobby as a whole.
Yeah, but it brings yeah, and that's sort of the gateway RPG. So it's the marijuana of the RPG world. So you come in on that 5e, and then sooner than you know it, you're mainlining Rule Cyclopedia. So
Yeah, we're out in the we're out in the desert in the van, printing off zines and getting ready to distribute them around.
that one's true. So mine was made up. You can't really mainline RCs. I've tried, but yeah, printing zines in a van, that's real. So so that's fun. Good times. So we have a little bit of a dichotomy. We have a difference. So just like planning a character build is not the same as building a character, so also is making intelligent choices or having your character make intelligent choices based on what they're presented with and their role. That's different than min maxing. So,
Yeah, I mean, it also goes down to that when you start saying intelligence choice. I know we're talking a completely different thing. My brain switched when you said that. My brain switched that the old debate of do I play my character dumb because he has a low intelligence score, or
mm,
like are you playing the character, or are you playing yourself playing that character type idea as well? But that's a different discussion. That's where my brain went when you said that.
yeah,
Um,
I have officially crapped on Critical Role. However, I will remember the fella who plays the stupid barbarian, the Intelligence 6 barbarian, had a beautiful moment where he was negotiating with a street merchant, and the offer was like 10 gold pieces, 20 gold pieces, compromise 25. And then their party treasurer had a little heart attack, and the DM reminded her, "No, no, you're not there." So he paid more than the merchant was asking, and it was a beautiful scene, and I laughed very hard, and woke up my son and ruined my workout. But anyway, so intelligent decisions versus min maxing. So, but
Right. And I think that you can have intelligence choices without being the quote unquote min maxer. It really comes down to the reason that you're doing what you're doing. Is it in service of the game, or is it in service of, hey, I got to win, so I'm going to do it this way? If I can I accept the fact that my character isn't the perfect thing in the world? Yes or no? Is it, am I going for this one gotcha trick and that's all this character is going to do? Even that isn't necessarily bad, as well, as long as you're willing to accept that that character may not be able to do the gotcha thing all the time. Like maybe there is a character who's, the only thing they can do is backflips. He's Captain Backflip, and that's all he can do, but he does it incredibly well.
it's the acrobat class.
Yeah, like, I mean, that's fine too. It's just whenever you refuse to accept the fact that sometimes you won't be able to be the center of attention and come off as the coolest kid on the block because you
Yep, absolutely.
pre-planned all this.
Yep, the insistence on talking about spike chains that I keep slipping in. I'm remembering an experience I had running games for a league. We had one player, not good guy. I would still play with him, but he brought in a character that was optimized for using a trip attack, and so he leveled some goblins because it was a low level league. But then the I handled it probably more poorly than I would in my experienced age now. But at the time, it was fun to he was a real shiner. For that first couple encounters, but then when they had quadrupedal mounts, all of a sudden it didn't work quite as nice. So, and
Yeah, I mean, I try not to be in the games I run. I try very hard to not be the adversarial DM,
mhm,
but sometimes whenever as a DM you make a mistake and you've allowed something to come in
mhm,
and you need to get rid of it. Rust monsters are a good way to get rid of some items that you really didn't want your players to have after you see how they abuse them. Things like that can happen. So yeah, I mean, if you've got somebody who's going to constantly abuse one mechanic,
mhm.
you bring in,
What a
or you
coincidence!
can,
Every module has centaurs now. I don't know why.
yeah, or simply, hey, the bad guy has heard how you, like, the big bad has heard how you are destroying everybody, and he's not stupid, so
Mhm,
he's went, oh, this guy always does this. Let's
mhm.
counter it.
Yep, and that came up as part of the other discussion. Is like do the enemies learn? And if they learn and they change, that's the mark of a DM as adversary, which is something we've been talking about. And I say we, it's primarily me, and then soliciting people. Hey, call in and pretend this is a thing. But I I digress. One of the things that I had been kind of babbling about and thinking about lately is the adversary versus the adversarial. And like you're saying, the in real life, if I'm trying to get armadillos out of my backyard, they're gonna figure out some of my tricks. If I'm trying to prevent my kids from getting in and playing with the pots and pans, they're going to figure out ways to get over that gate. So, true story, we do have a gate to keep them out of the kitchen, but likewise, true story, they will go into the bathroom, take their little stairs that lets them brush their teeth, and then they will put that by the gate and climb over. So they learn and they change and they adapt. And so that kind of behavior, that's child as adversary. And you apply this to your game, that's referee as adversary. And you need that when you have a game that's not necessarily a narrative experience. So when the purpose is not to showcase a story, so because if you're writing a novel together, then you don't necessarily need a system. Dice are fun because it changes things up. You can use the Oracle to change. And I was talking to James of the Subclass Act podcast the other
Amazing,
day.
amazing podcast.
Yep,
If you
absolutely.
have not listened, people, go listen to it. It's great.
Yep, yep. It's he goes into great detail on oracles, which people use for solo play. So it's kind of like an GM emulator, and that can be a lot of fun to drive narrative. So you can tell a story, and it forces you to think in different directions, and it changes. It throws that player. that player agency into the randomization. And now, admittedly, I didn't publish it, but I did author and draft a because we have a bunch of GM emulators. I made a player emulator, aha, niche that hasn't been filled. You
Mm.
roll a you roll 2 die 6 on a 1 through 11. They do something stupid. So cool. And then on a 12 they don't. And then on a 12 somebody doesn't show up.
Ah,
So
man, I gotta get those dice because I get that 12 quite a
yeah. Yeah, that's why I like
um,
roll under systems. So I always roll low.
I actually, speaking of Fantasy Trip, that was one of the things that really drew me to it. I obviously did not play Fantasy Trip back when it first came out.
Mm-hmm.
I picked this up much later when the new box set came out. Um, but that's one of the things that kind of drew me to Fantasy Trip was the whole idea of roll under. Um, very much like the Black Hack or something like that. That whole roll under your stats for a lot of things appeals to me very much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Also because my dice rolls suck and I roll really terrible too. Yeah, there's something about rolling under that appeals to me quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I don't. It really is the adversary versus adversarial. The name of it almost pollutes the conversation a little bit because when somebody says you're an adversarial DM, I would probably immediately get a little defensive about it, saying, "Well, no, I'm not trying to screw the players because that's how
Mm-hmm.
I interpret that phrase, right? The if you're the adversarial DM, you're out to pull the rug out from underneath them, and you're trying to ruin their time, and that's not how I view it. I want to make sure the world, I view my world, my job as, hey, I'm making sure the world is reacting to what you're doing appropriately, whether that's good for you or bad for you,
Mm-hmm.
however it may be. But my number one job is make sure the world is believable
Mm-hmm.
and reacting properly. And the DM is supposed to be an adversary of some sort. Their job is to create drama, to create conflict.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, there's going to be that, but I'm cheering for them to. I'm interested to see what clever or stupid, or if it works, it's not stupid idea that they come up with, right?
It's only stupid if it fails. So
Yeah.
it's
So
only it's kind of like if it's only hubris if you die. So
So yeah, I mean, I'm not adversarial in the sense that I'm hoping I'm not going into the session going, all right,
mm.
this is session 6, time for TPK. Like that's not the goal. The goal is um, here's a cool problem. You tell me how you fix it. I don't know how you're gonna fix it.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought of the cool problem while I was
Mm-hmm.
having a shower this morning. Let's see how you guys figure out how to get out of it.
Yep. Yeah, that's one of the big draws for me is throw something at them to see what they do. So absolutely. And so oh man, and that talking about dumb decisions. Um, I will admit, if I play a low intelligence character, I don't necessarily withhold high intelligence ideas. So I'm not one to produce a lot of high intelligence ideas. So I'm very happy when they randomly come across. And but the moral story is my thoughts on the subject are, um, if there is an intelligent character in the party, then who's to say that my character is the one who came up with the idea? So.
Yeah, I struggle with intelligence and wisdom as a stat in terms of how do you role play your character based off of intelligence and wisdom. I think I view those stats more as they're there for the mechanical reasons that they're there, and less so for what those words mean in terms of a personality of the character. So
Mhm.
I'm fine with intelligence being, how many languages or how many spells or that sort of
Mhm.
thing, but I wouldn't say, hey, you've got a low intelligence, so you sit in the corner and drool. 'Cause, like, like, I mean, if you want to play your character that way, that's fine. But
Mhm.
I'm totally fine in most cases of the quote unquote meta game of, you're playing, you're you as a player are solving the problem and then executing it through your character, as opposed to the character itself being the one solving the problem. I'm totally
Mhm.
fine with that because I think the opposite is also true. If I roll an 18 intelligence character, I
Mhm.
personally am not that smart. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
it would be very difficult for me to play a character that is this genius level because I
Mm-hmm.
am not. So
Mm-hmm.
it should be, I would view it the same way the other way as well, right?
Right. So it would make narrative sense. So in the novel that that the DM writes, that he's totally going to write after the campaign's over. So was that a thing for your early groups? Because that was so a thing when I was younger. So so before.
No,
Mm-hmm.
no. I did that once. Once, one campaign, I was like, I'm going to do this and take
Mm-hmm.
notes on it. But no,
Mm-hmm.
like most DMs and whoever attempt to try that, it
Mm-hmm.
blew up poorly. But for most of my friend group, no, that wasn't really a thing. I
Mm-hmm.
have seen it, but it just wasn't something we did.
Yeah. So, and for the younger audience who may not remember a time before the internet, before you had these streams and YouTubes, and you could get super famous playing D&D that way. The running joke was that one player or the DM was setting a story in motion, and the after the campaign was over, they would translate it into this epic fantasy novel that they would totally sell to Harper. So, but.
Yeah, the 16
Mm,
book series that
mm.
they'll definitely finish before George R. R. Martin finishes his, and
Mhm. That part's probably true. So
yeah, yeah, likely. I mean,
very likely.
I'm pretty sure I can get my epic done in that time.
Mm. So I could probably rewrite mine. I wrote. I remember. I used to write all the time. You know, before the dark times. But but no, yeah, I used to write all the time. I had. But yeah, a full fantasy novel that I think got eaten up in a dead hard drive. So I could probably put
Oh,
that back together. So, but yeah,
that's a terrible loss
yeah,
to have something like that go in.
yeah.
That
That's
is, I
okay.
guess, that is one nice side of our modern times, though,
Hmm.
is now there's so many places that you could stick that you never probably
Hmm.
have to worry about that so much again.
Oh,
But
absolutely. I still have like I went in to upload a file to share on Google Drive, and I noticed it had Google Buzz conversations archived, and I was like, I don't even know what Buzz is. So it'll archive stuff that may or may not even have existed. So it's the Wells Fargo moment. They signed you up for something you didn't know about. So
uh, good call on that one.
mm.
That is personally for me and a fun one for a different conversation, but not for here. Uh,
Different podcast.
different podcast altogether. Um, but yeah, the it's funny you mentioned the Google too, because as soon as you said that, my brain jumped back to Google Plus
Mm.
and everything that was happening there. It is sad that that forum
Mm.
is gone. Um,
Mm.
what is where is your number one source of if you just want to go and observe conversations or participate? I generally tend to lurk much more than I participate,
Mm.
but where do you go to are you pretty much like a big blog rule, or are you on Twitter more, or are you on Reddit more, or where is it that you go for your OSR fix?
Yeah, I will admit I tried Reddit. I can't do Reddit. It's just something that doesn't jive for me. Against my better judgment, I did make a Twitter. So and I've been playing with that a lot. I had fun the first day or two because people on Twitter melt down over the dumbest stuff, and so some you know, it's like the concern over I I I pause a minute because I fear I may offend my listeners, but my three listeners. But so I'm trying to think. So if it's if we'll talk about the combat wheelchair, for example. So the if it is a greater disservice to the disabled community not to have the combat wheelchair options in your game, and people melt down about that, my brain, I think back and I'm like, you know, I can remember holding my mother's hand when she passed away, and I remember the warmth fading into cold, and I kept holding because I knew that I wasn't going to get to hold her hand again in this life, and all of a sudden RPGs. It doesn't matter what happens in that RPG. It's just you compare it to this real life event, and all of a sudden it just doesn't matter. And so,
Even
mhm,
even in a world where these causes are incredibly important to you,
mhm,
right? Like
mhm,
even if the person, because I honestly feel that a lot of that on Twitter and
mhm,
other social media networks is. more outrage for the
Mhm.
sake of patting yourself on the back to make because you
Yes.
think you are a good
Yep,
person for it.
absolutely. It's outrage for attention, and you're right. There are things that are important. I will specify I've never turned someone away from my table for politics or for disability or for dumb character ideas. Uh, it's about the game, and it's about the
Right.
experience together, and it's about sharing something that you love with people who may love it also. And but I interrupted.
No,
Continue.
everything you're saying is. I'm nodding along. I completely agree
Hmm.
with you. I think the issue with all of that is you have one side of that debate or discussion or argument or whatever you want
Hmm.
to call it, um, that seems to think that every single game has to
Hmm.
have these components, and
Hmm.
then you have the other side that says, I will insert the components that make sense for my world or for my players or for my games as those things rotate through.
Hmm.
Or I think that's dumb because it doesn't fit my world and my players don't
Hmm.
want it. But there doesn't seem to be. Like,
Hmm.
you have one side that thinks that people are coming to burn all their old books and
Hmm.
dictate how every game should be played, and another group that says, well, if you don't include this, you're a terrible person because you're
Hmm.
insensitive about something else. And it's like there's
Hmm.
no middle ground. Like
Right.
why is everything such a binary choice? I
Hmm.
Most of the games I'm in, I don't really care if there's a
Hmm.
wheelchair in there or not. It doesn't matter.
Hmm.
If it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense.
Hmm.
But if a player came to me and said, "Hey, this is what I want to do," if it's not going to break anything, I don't care. I'll put it in. Sure.
Yeah.
Um,
If it
it's
doesn't kill the experience, absolutely.
Yeah. Like if I have that same issue with a lot of the safety tool discussions and everything else,
Hmm.
where it feels like it's all ways to avoid having a conversation.
Hmm.
It 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 really feels like, hey, I don't want to have the potential of having a conflict with
Hmm.
anybody or have a discussion where it's everybody doesn't agree with me. So I want a tool so that don't have like I don't know. It feels like
Hmm. It's a
be a
very
person to
social.
talk.
Yeah, it's a very social game. It's a very personal experience, and I tend not to play with people I don't consider friends. And knowing that, I feel open with them. I feel the ability. And if anybody's a player in my game, I hope that they feel empowered to approach me if I do something that is damaging them or damaging the experience for them. But at the same time, if you told me I needed to include a safety tool, I would say a 4 letter one fingered response. I do very poorly. Admittedly, I'm a bit of a child in that regard. I don't like being told what to do. But at the end of the day, that's a great way to put it. The way you just said it is, it's replacing that relationship with a tool. It's taking a process and putting it in place of a person. And so, uh, my little
Yeah,
hand
and
gestures, I should have reversed those, but that's okay.
no, and I think you have and part of the reason why I think you have such a divide on where
Hmm.
typically, not always, but where typically you have people
Hmm.
fall, whether it be quote unquote grognard old school folks and
Hmm.
on one side of that debate and the new school indie guys fall on another side of that debate is more
Hmm.
that a part of that friction and part of the reason why there's that divide. I think is a case of you have one group of people that have been playing the game for a long while. They feel they understand how it works. They've
Hmm.
seen conflicts come up. They've resolved them. They've experienced various things with the game, and they look at it as somebody new coming in and saying,
Hmm.
everything you've done is wrong. You have to do it this way. And
Hmm.
immediately, regardless of how valid any of those discussions may or may not be, the back
Hmm.
goes up because you've just put somebody on the defensive.
Yep, it's an
Um,
accusatory moment. Yep.
and then as soon as that is there, then human nature kicks in and both sides just embed into their
Hmm.
own sides and nothing gets resolved. And it
Hmm.
becomes such a, not to overuse that word, but it does become a very toxic spot where
Hmm.
people aren't listening. They're just shouting and nobody hears what anybody's saying.
Hmm.
I don't know
Talking past
that's
each other.
yeah, that's the downside to a lot of social media stuff. So like
Hmm.
I also have Twitter, and I have mine very narrowly defined down to like
Hmm.
my Red Caps Twitter account is RPG related only. You will
Hmm.
not see hardly any other thing ever posted on there from me other than an RPG related item,
Hmm.
strictly because I find there's no need to have any other discussions with on there. It just
Yeah,
devolves into shouting.
yeah, and mine's getting there. So my Cleric Swear Ringmail account on Twitter is getting there. And now there are occasional like ads that don't necessarily make sense, and there's occasional political stuff, but it's kind of really narrowed. I gotta give it to their AI there. It's getting to the point where I'm seeing primarily stuff that I want to see. So
Yeah, I take liberal use of the blocking of words and stuff in the settings. Like currently, we're entering into a Canadian election cycle here. On Monday, actually, the polls open up.
yeah, the
So
ballots are
uh,
made out of maple leaves. So
yeah, and we sign with syrup.
oh
It's
yeah,
great. Um, but
only if it's cold enough. So
well, we have a little freezer, so you you
okay,
you
perfect.
you put you put the drop of maple syrup on, and then you stick it in the little freezer thing, and then you fold it and put it in the box.
Oh, kind of like the Scantron, like the standardized test papers, except with
Yeah,
syrup. Perfect.
yeah, yeah,
You,
it
you
works
guys,
out well. And if you misdo it, then you get to lick the paper clean and do it again.
oh, you guys just have it figured out. Yeah, we're down here with our hanging chads, and you guys just have this together.
But yeah, so I like because that had taken place at this time, I go in and just like remove because living in Canada, the algorithm feeds me Canadian related news and topics, and I'm like, I have opinions on that. I just don't care to get involved with them on this forum, so
No,
I block all those words,
yep,
and it helps keep that social media experience a
yep,
little bit
yep,
more
absolutely.
friendly.
Yep, it's like it's the Eric Tenkar approach. Those are important conversations to have. We just don't want to have them here because
Yeah,
this forum is for something else. So
yeah, exactly. Um, we live in an age where everybody seems to have an opinion on everything, and I don't think
yeah,
that's true.
and a lot of folks have a hard time separating different parts of their life. So
Yeah,
their gaming habits are influenced by their politics, which is influenced by their diet, which is influenced by where they live, and it's all this one big soup of who they are, as opposed to finding common ground and then finding common ground and building on it. So
yeah, yeah. There are definitely personalities in the OSR sphere that I appreciate for when they're talking about gaming. I find their discussions about gaming and what have you to be very very interesting. Don't always agree with them, but they're interesting conversations to hear. And then they will spill off into other conversations where I'm like, yeah, not
gotta
we would definitely not agree there and maybe not get along too well over those topics, but it doesn't matter because the reason I'm paying any attention to you at all is because we have a common interest that I
yep, that
enjoy,
we can
right?
share.
So
So yep, absolutely. And yeah, I took you've heard of the RPG woke list, the red, yellow,
no,
green. Oh, this is fun. I get to introduce you to something that took Twitter by storm for a while. So on the RPG site, that is the forum that's maintained by I think his name is John Kazimir Urbanski. The name I was looking for was Kazimir Urbanski. RPG pundit. One of their members compiled a list of big RPG companies and arranged them into three categories: woke, not woke, and then maybe. So the not woke, the green list, were people who were either apolitical or who stood for traditional values. I think the way is what he put it. The yellow list, which was the maybes, were the companies that uh, put up uh, put up political stuff on their social media where it was appropriate, but then didn't necessarily dump it in their games. And then the red list were companies that injected politics directly into the text of the game. And so the Wizards of the Coast was on that list. Uh, let's see, but as well as I think Evil Hat was on that list. Who is coming out with Thirsty Sword Lesbians is their next big project they're working on.
I would assume Monty Cook and anything that he's touched is on the
Is
list,
on the
and
list, absolutely. Yeah, I will. I have not picked it out, so I am one of those people who tends to separate art from the artist. I enjoy, but I did take a look at the list, and people like you may have assumed based on the nature of a conversation, people on social media have been very up in arms over this list. So there were a lot of people who were very upset about it. There were a lot of people on the one spectrum or the other who were saying, "I want to be on the this color list. How do I submit for this list?" Which is silly. It's a forum. You can just go and post. But I digress. The important part is I looked at it once because I don't care. Uh, I have other things to do with my time. Let's see. Picking my nose. That's a good. That's a much better use of my time than worrying about the politics of gaming companies. But anyway, I come to find out I have purchased product from at least one company from all three of those lists. So at the end of
I bet you I could look at my shelf right now and pick out
and
one
pick out
from all
something.
three.
Yep, absolutely. And
As-
yep, and that's the name of the game. It's about sharing an experience. And now some of the products I have no interest in. So the very narrative focused games I'm not as big in. But that doesn't mean other people aren't, and that doesn't mean that I couldn't enjoy that if I had more time to try it. So, but yeah, so the key is to separate art from the artist, in my opinion, so that you expose yourself to the greatest variety of source material that you can incorporate into the game to make it fit what your experience is supposed to be. So, but that's
yeah,
just me. So,
I think if you approach it with the idea of don't yuck somebody else's
mm-hmm,
yum,
mm-hmm,
right? If somebody else enjoys something, good for them.
mm-hmm,
There's a market for it. They're that
mm-hmm,
market. Fill your boots.
yep,
Just don't try to say that because your market exists, it's better, and that another one should disappear.
yeah.
Um,
Yep, we,
and
we live in a free society. It is absolutely okay to be wrong.
yeah, it's fine to be wrong. It's fine to just
Mm-hmm,
not like the same things. Like I
mm-hmm,
don't, I get so. Why does everybody have to be
mm-hmm,
uniform on it? Like I've expressed it, uh,
mm-hmm,
opinions in this podcast here of how I look at character builds and min maxing, and we were talking about Shadowrun,
mm-hmm,
a game that the idea and the world and the overall story of Shadowrun, mwah, I think it's fantastic. The game,
mm-hmm.
I don't want to touch with a 10-foot pole. I think it's terrible. Um,
Yep,
but I'm not gonna rag on somebody else who enjoys that. That's awesome.
right.
I'm glad that exists for them to enjoy that. It's
Yep.
just everything about that system screams hell no to me.
Mm-hmm,
But the it's there for somebody else, and I'm glad that's there.
mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Absolutely. So, and if I think I've said this once or twice before, but if we all liked the same thing, then that thing would become it would have to be so generic that it would lose flavor. So,
Yeah, be white bread.
yep, it would. So,
But yeah, and yeah, it's kind of the same thing with personalities. I mean, you were
mm-hmm,
talking about the RPG pundit. There's a few other personalities
mm-hmm,
in our community that orbit in that same
mm-hmm,
realm as he is. Where again, he falls very much into that orbit of me. Where when he
mm-hmm,
sticks to talking about gaming,
mm-hmm,
I don't always agree with everything he says, but it's interesting to listen to him.
mm-hmm,
When he spins off into other areas, it feels like a call for attention to me.
mm-hmm,
And that's my take on it.
mm-hmm,
I sometimes him and people like Stannis. I sometimes
mm-hmm,
wonder how legitimately strong those beliefs are, and how much of it is I'm
mm-hmm.
going to
How
be
much of his marketing? Yeah.
yeah, how much of it is contrarian just to be attention seeking.
Mm-hmm,
Um, and so I just ignore that because it's not part of why I'm there to see any of their stuff. And I may think it's silly, but if that works for them, so be it. I'm there to consume the gaming content that they have or the gaming ideas they may have and see how that goes.
yep. Yep.
So
Absolutely. And that's the name of the game. So, and the game. Fun, fun. So, oh, fun. But so,
but yeah, so I mean, we've talked about that. I think in this conversation we've ended up agreeing more than we disagreed. So I'm not sure how interesting this was to everybody else. If they were looking for a battle of differing opinions, I think this was mostly a yeah, you're right. Yeah, I know I'm right because I'm right. The whole way through.
Yeah, that's the key to that's the key to a good friendship. You grab people who agree with you on stuff, and then you stick to it. So I could tell you all about. So we could disagree on something. We could probably disagree on snow. So
That's going to really depend. Tell me your opinion on snow because we may actually agree on that.
uh, I enjoy snow.
Oh well, no, we don't agree at
Yeah.
all.
Now, to clarify, I live in Florida. The only snow that I ever encounter is on a cone, but I do have I used to have family in the Appalachian Mountains, about 8-10 hours from where I am now. Used to live a little closer, but what we would do is we would go up there in the Thanksgiving time frame, the early part of the year, so where it's still winter, not yet spring, and so we would go up into the high country, and it would snow a handful of inches. We get to build a snowman. We'd get to bundle up and drink hot chocolate, and then we would get to slap those chains on the tires and drive right on back to 80 degrees. 80 degrees, and
So where I grew up in Canada, winters were terrible. Where I live now, near the Toronto area, winters are not bad. It's
mm,
very temperate here.
mm,
There are several U.S. states that are further north than I am,
mm,
technically. So I will not complain too much about the winter where I'm at. However, large amounts of snow all winter long is no
mm,
fun for anybody. It is
mm,
definitely something to go and visit. Much like how. When I have gone to Florida and went, oh, it's beautiful down here, the weather and everything, but I also melt. So it's nice to go back to a place where my face doesn't melt off every time I step outside. I
where you
don't
don't
know
have
how
to
anybody
change
live.
clothing between the car and the entrance to the mall. So
Yeah, living in an area where I don't know what it works out to in freedom degrees, but if it is like, close to 40 degrees Celsius at any point in time, I don't want to be there. That is too hot.
that's the key. Florida is wonderful in the spring and autumn, and then in the summer you just leave it to the alligators and the tourists. Because the spring and the autumn, it's between like 75 and 80 freedom eagles, so close to 30 centigrade, and that's beautiful. That's perfect beach weather. Well, between probably 27 and 30 is happy beach weather for me. I start getting uncomfortable about 32, 33. Uh,
Yeah. I was funny enough. I was having a conversation with my next door neighbor a day and a half ago, and we were talking about how um, different places in the world you wouldn't want to live
mhm,
due to the risks associated to living there, and
mhm,
how easy we have it going where we are located. We have no deadly animals. There's no
mhm.
crocodiles or alligators that are going to snap us up.
Yeah, I
We
had
don't
one of
have
those in my
hurricanes.
backyard last year, actually. So,
That's insane.
yeah, my
The fact
wife.
that we
Yeah,
don't
my
we
wife
don't have
was on.
hurricanes or earthquakes or
Yeah, my first 3 years here, we evacuated. Hurricanes Matthew, uh, what was the Irma, and then I think, yeah, I forget. I think we did not evacuate for that third one. At that point, we were just like, screw it, we're gonna buy pasta and a Bunsen burner. But and then that hurricane was like, oh, you're not leaving, and then missed, and then hit New York or something. But anyway, the my wife was on the treadmill and heard a popping noise. She thought a branch had fallen, and the she went back, checked on the boys. They were asleep. Got back on the treadmill. Nope. Come to find out, there was a 7-foot alligator in our backyard, and the neighbor had seen it. Called the police. The police called animal control, but the guy couldn't get out there for a couple days. And there are kids in our neighborhood. There are dogs walking, and so the popping she heard was the police doing away with the alligator. So 38
yeah,
special, but
yeah. See, yeah, I would move. Same as like Australia is on my like bucket list of places to live or not live but visit. Sorry, but I would never want to live there because I'm like the entire country is designed to kill you. Why? I don't want to live in a place that's designed to kill me. Why no?
yep, you've seen the huntsman spider videos where
Yeah,
they had the explosion of spiders where your ceiling was literally roiling with them, and people would just go to sleep because they won't bite me.
yeah. Or places where people like I've got friends that live in Arizona and stuff, and they talk about having to like dump their boots out to make sure that there
There's
isn't.
no scorpions. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, no, no, that's just wrong. No.
Live. Yeah, I was. I was walking in the lawn and I felt a pinching, slashing sensation. I looked down, there was nothing there. It was just the grass. So, yeah, live somewhere where the grass doesn't want to hurt you.
I used to complain when it was
Mm,
cold. I used to be like, why do I live someplace where the wind hurts my face?
mm.
But I'll take that over alligators and hurricanes and everything
Yeah,
else.
yeah. One of our neighbors had a bobcat in their garage a year or two back. That was fun. It got caught, and it was like a they're what are they 35 pounds of hate and murder. It was just in the garage. They had a hard time getting they eventually got it out, but you open the garage door and I don't know, dump a load of catnip. I don't know, but
The,
who
the the worst I have to deal with near here is Canadian geese,
hmm
who are their own vicious animal,
yeah,
but not anywhere to the degree of
yeah,
what you're describing.
yeah. It's funny you say that. We have Canada geese down here also because the Wikipedia will tell you that they come as far as Florida for winter months. That is a lie. They stay year round. They are the literal definition of snowbirds because they came down, they liked it, and they stayed. And the only thing that pushes them out is those hurricanes. So your choice is the hurricane or Canada geese. So
Yeah,
and
yeah.
those suckers will stop traffic.
Oh, yeah. You don't want to try to get anywhere near where they may be nesting. They get very upset and they get very large.
Yep, they absolutely do. Oh, spooky. But
So we have now taken your RPG podcast and made it a nature documentary. So the three listeners, I hope you enjoyed that as well.
we did indeed. So, and we've hit about all of the little points that I had thought about, and we found a couple new ones, which was fun. I want to say thank you, Kevin, for coming on. It was a blast. I had a lot of fun chatting. I think these kind of conversations go really well when you have someone to bounce off of. And so, even if we agreed on everything except snow cones and geese, then the I think the listeners they'll be okay with us. At the end of the time, we'll jump into some shameless shilling. I am, of course, Clerics Wear Ringmail. You've already found me if you're listening to it. Kevin is with he runs a podcast, The Red Caps. I will put a link in the description. And if there's other stuff, Kevin, you'd like to guide us to any Kickstarters you're backing, any shows you're watching or listening to, I'll give you the floor.
All the Kickstarters I have going on right now have all fulfilled, so I don't have anything to shill in that direction.
Mm,
I don't think, but I would say explore the entire Anchor verse of RPG
mm,
podcast. It is wide and deep and full of amazing characters. So
mm,
while we are both in that same pool, um, there's undoubtedly tons more that you can listen to and have a great time. So I encourage you to
mm.
explore a little bit on Anchor and find everybody's great podcasts.
Yep, yep, absolutely. It is a pool, but it is also Olympic sized, and so. But all right, all right. Thank you again, Kevin, for popping on, and I will sign off. My beer is empty just in time. So, all right. Have a beautiful weekend, everybody.
Take care.
Theme music used for the Clerics Wearing Mail podcast is adapted from Pursuing Darkness by artist X Take Rux, released into the public domain and made available on freemusicarchive.org. Sound effects used in the making of this product retrieved from mixkit.co, used under the Mixkit sound effects free license, or from soundj.com and used in accordance with the soundj.com terms of use. Segments recorded within a vehicle are recorded using a Bluetooth hands-free device in conjunction with local vehicular safety legislation. The Clerics Wearing Mail podcast is an independently owned and operated product released for educational and informative purposes under the Totally Steal This license, which is kind of like Creative Commons, except licensing. Clerics Wearing Mail does not ascribe to nor endorse views or opinions expressed by call-ins, guests, or even the host, unless you think they're awesome, and thus does not assume any liability regarding the consumption or distribution of this podcast. By listening to the Clerics Wearing Mail podcast, you agree to the provided term. Parties with questions regarding these terms, conditions, or releases are encouraged to reach out to Clerics Wearing Mail at the prescribed methods provided on the Clerics Wearing Mail blog. Parties dissatisfied with these terms, conditions, or releases are encouraged to go suck an egg.